All clear over here. You?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. How long does it take to check one fucking closet?
You know, it wouldn't take as long if I had our only flashlight.
Nuh-uh. This flashlight is for employees who don't mouth off to supervisors. Ah, the beautiful silence of someone who knows his place.
Right. Closet's clear, in case you were wondering. Why do you gotta make everything so difficult, huh? It's bad enough that we have to make our way through this exclusion zone, and now we have to do this all on foot because we can't bring our Jeep in. What? Why are you looking at?
The wall.
Okay, why are you looking at the wall?
Because it's way more interesting than whatever you're bitching about.
See, this is what I... Forget it. So what now?
Oh my god. As I said earlier, we gotta stay here till the storm blows over. And you've got a game to review.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was suspended for messing up the last community poll or whatever.
Congrats, you're unsuspended. Here's the game. Now piss off and get to work.
Alright, I'm going. Joke's on him, because I've been looking forward to playing this. And it seems I was the only one judging by the player count. Well, let's see why no one showed up to this game's party. Oh boy, this is gonna be a tough one to write. If I had $1 for every time I reviewed a game about mental illness that was released near something Elden Ring related, I'd have $2, which isn't a lot, and now that I'm thinking about it, is a bit of a stretch. Bad intro, start over. So Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 is the long-awaited sequel to Ninja Theory's almost decade-old budget hit, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. The puzzles were simplistic and the combat was so-so, but the stellar art direction, nightmarish atmosphere, harrowing performance by Melina Juergens as Senua, and poignant depiction of psychosis and self-loathing more than made up for its shortcomings. Lightning in a bottle, without a doubt. Not only was it self-funded, self-published, and developed by a team of 20 people, but Juergens had no acting experience prior to playing Senua. She originally worked as the studio's video editor before being asked to perform a scene to test their mocap tech. According to an interview with Juergens, Hellblade's director was so taken with her performance that he said, maybe we don't need to bring Jennifer Hale in for this one, or something like that, and offered her the role. She accepted, and the result?
And the winner is... Melina Juergens in Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
And the Game Award goes to Melina Juergens' Hellblade!
Thanks for recognizing a talented actress, Jeff Keighley, you Dorito-shilling hack bomb. Anyway, long story short, Ninja Theory was acquired by Microsoft a year later, unveiled Hellblade 2 in 2019, released a gameplay trailer in 2021, and then went mostly radio silent until earlier this year when they announced the release date and posted a slightly concerning statement on Twitter, formerly known as X. Here's a couple of excerpts from it. Making video games is difficult. Much like Senua, we as a team have been guided by a conviction to achieve our quest, to make a game that sinks you deep into Senua's world, and to take you on a journey that leaves you thinking and feeling. I'm very proud of this game, very proud of our team, and very proud of you, our fans, who have supported us on this magical journey. Now, I interpreted this statement as Microsoft has no faith in our game and will shut us down if it underperforms. Or rather, I would have interpreted it that way if I completely ignored that their next game has already been greenlit. Can I rant for a second? I'm not a fan of the discourse surrounding Hellblade 2. I feel that nuance and healthy skepticism have once again gone out the window in favor of hyperbolic statements and wearisome cynicism. And you need only glance at the YouTube thumbnails for proof. such as Hellblade 2, the game that destroyed Ninja Theory. Hellblade 2 is a terrible game but. Hellblade 2 is a pathetic excuse for a game. Hellblade 2 is so bad. Hellblade 2 is an absolute joke. Hellblade 2 is a complete failure. Hellblade 2 is a glorified tech demo that's dead on arrival. Xbox Game Studios did not. Hellblade 2 is shockingly bad. I swear, if you went by these alone, you'd be led to believe that Hellblade 2 is another Gollum-level disaster. Look, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I'd argue calling this game a complete failure is disingenuous at best and clickbait bullshit at worst. You want to play something that's actually a complete failure? Go play f***ing Tunnel Rats. And don't take this as me white knighting for Hellblade 2 because I'm a Microsoft shill who thinks it's a masterpiece. I'm not, and it most certainly isn't. I'm just sick of going through the same discourse every time a divisive game comes out. There's being critical about a game, and then there's salivating at the thought of it being the next big flop, like a vulture circling a limping man in the desert. And while it's true that the game is underperformed, let's not throw in the towel for Ninja Theory just yet, okay? I'm not advocating for blind faith in publishers here, especially not Microsoft. By all means, be skeptical, but don't yell fire because your roommate slightly burned his eggs on the stove. Anyway, I'm starting to slide around on the soapbox here, so let's just dive into the game.
I will not let them down.
She is ready. They know. Go.
So I'm assuming you've played the first Hellblade if you're watching this review, but if you haven't, well, I'll catch you up on the first game's ending before going over Hellblade 2's plot. Sound good? Great. Also spoilers. Duh. So the story of Hellblade 2 picks up shortly after the end of the first game. Senua's grueling journey into the bowels of hell to retrieve the soul of her lover Dillion, killed during a raid on her village by Northman slavers, ended in a harrowing confrontation with her inner darkness. The journey, as it turned out, was a product of her mind, a mythical fantasy born from her refusal to come to grips with Dillion's death, and spurred on by the belief that her psychosis, which causes her to hallucinate and hear voices, is a curse from the gods. Senua was able to face her darkness and conquer it, finally making peace with Dillion's death and learning how to live with her psychosis, now understanding that it's a condition, not a curse, contrary to what her fanatical druid father insisted. With the threat of the Northmen still looming over the land, Senua vows to end their reign of slavery as a way to avenge Dillion. She allows herself to be taken as a slave in order to locate their stronghold, but as the slave ship approaches the Northmen's island, a violent storm destroys it. She washes up on the beach and fights her way through the surviving slavers, eventually locating and subduing the ship's captain, Thorgistir, whose father is responsible for her people's enslavement. Unwavered, Senua marches on with the captured slaver through this dangerous land of druids, cults, tyrants, and giants, determined to rescue her people and avenge Dillion.
She has to save them.
You have to. There is no other way.
It's why we have come here.
I'm not leaving until I get what I came for.
You made a promise.
She made a promise.
You promised.
I made a promise.
So let's start by getting the obvious out of the way. Hellblade 2 has incredible visuals, by far the most detailed I've seen in any game, surpassing the already astonishing visuals of the first game. And just a reminder, this, right here, was made by 20 people. But you can see they've taken advantage of that newly acquired Microsoft budget, with the visuals veering frighteningly close to lifelike. Thankfully, it avoids toppling off a cliff and breaking its legs on the way down to the uncanny valley. Very easy to do when you're blending photorealistic visuals with surreal imagery. But Hellblade 2 pulls it off. Quite successfully, I may add. I have some criticisms with the pacing which we'll get into later, but I can't say that I wasn't captivated by the scenery the whole way through. The island is one that's been ravaged by natural disasters, hurricanes, volcanoes, harsh winters, and you see the effects of them firsthand, with Senua's journey taking her through stormy beaches, arid lands, and frozen tundras. But it's the way it seamlessly shifts from gorgeous vistas to dreamlike scenery that grabbed me, pulling me back into the world as Senua views it, where the lines between myth and reality become increasingly more blurred.
It's beautiful.
Yes, it is.
This whole island could be
Even now.
And I'm also impressed by how detailed the faces meh blah 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 blah. Look, I'm not gonna bore you to death by talking about the graphics. You don't need me to describe in painful detail every bead of sweat running down Senua's face, nor do you need me to studiously analyze the rock textures. I say, what do you take me for, boy? A geologist? I ain't that classy. I review games, son. Interactive media. When I push a button on this controller here, I want the character on the television to do something, and the game could look like a cave painting for all I care. Boy's got an eye like a broken microscope, always focusing on the wrong thing. What deserves plenty of praise, however, is the sound design. And I'm not just referring to the ambience, sublime though it is, but more about the way it presents Senua's psychosis, how the voices in her head are an almost constant presence throughout, with the game utilizing its surround sound to great effect.
What's that shadow? What? Butchering. Slaughtering. I thought it couldn't get any worse. How could you make them stop? What are they? It's too much. What are they? It's just too much. They're not human. They can't be. They're monsters.
I remember being struck by this detail in the first game, as I expected her psychosis to be shown exclusively in the cutscenes. A good old case of ludonarrative dissonance, you know? Not so. It takes full advantage of the interactive medium, making Senua's condition a part of the moment-to-moment gameplay. Paranoid thoughts, conflicting advice, and fearful whispers torment you, at times making it difficult to focus on the task at hand.
Where is it taking her?
Everything you have done has brought you here.
To nothing.
Nowhere. Maybe your father was right.
Maybe you are nothing.
Maybe you will die here.
Just like the others.
No one will remember you.
You will be nothing.
Great care was taken in depicting this condition as accurately as possible, with the studio consulting both neuroscientists and those who've experienced it firsthand. It's intense, visceral, and uncompromising, and that's what makes it effective, but also tough to sit through.
Where are you?
You brought them here.
You brought them here. Now they are lost,
You brought them here to die. Don't listen to him. They followed you.
doomed to die alone in darkness.
Stay strong.
So yeah, it's easy to see from the presentation alone why Hellblade 2 has earned its share of perfect scores. Games Radar here called it video game sorcery and gave it 5 stars, and wouldn't you know it, one of the pros has to do with the visuals and immersion. I get it, it's top-notch stuff, and it can easily distract you from the game's endless walk and talk sequences, lame puzzles, clunky combat, and sloppy storytelling. Whoa, way to drop a critic bomb out of nowhere, but it does make for a good segue, doesn't it? So let's talk about the gameplay, everybody. I'll admit, I started this section off on the wrong foot. It wasn't fair to callously dismiss Hellblade 2's gameplay like that, especially given my rant about hyperbole earlier. So bear with me as we take it from the top. So Hellblade 2's gameplay consists of, it's not good. There, I'm ripping the band-aid off right now. I hate to agree with the clickbait crowd here, but it's true. Hellblade 2's gameplay is stale, dated, clunky, and worst of all, boring. Now, before all you Hellblade 2 fans start pounding your keyboards and typing things like, to be fair, most of your complaints could be said about the first game as well. Okay, 1, I never said Hellblade's gameplay was brilliant. And 2, I actually don't agree with that statement because somehow Hellblade 2 plays worse than the game that came out in 2017. 7 fucking years ago. I'm not gonna call it an interactive movie, but I will say that's 2 steps away from being one.
Again, could be said about the first game as well.
Well, maybe I expected more from a studio that was given a hefty Microsoft budget this time. I was more forgiving of Hellblade's shortcomings because the narrative was strong and most of its issues could be fixed in a sequel. Make the puzzles more engaging, let us explore the world some more, give the combat more depth, etc. Instead, it's like Ninja Theory glanced at the criticisms of Hellblade's gameplay and went, oh I know, let's have even less of it this time. So get ready to slam that left joystick forward because you're gonna do a whole lot of walking. Yes sir, there's walking and oh what's this? Walking and talking too? Hellblade 2, you spoil me. And just to spice things up, how about some narrow passages to squeeze through? Okay, seriously, can we stop this? I know it was mind-blowing a decade ago, but I'm sorry, squeezing through a narrow passage is no longer an immersive way to hide a loading screen. It's distracting, and its overuse in games today is bordering on parody. Maybe I wouldn't be bitching about as much if the gameplay was interesting, but it isn't. It's boring. I'm not kidding when I say that the only parts of the gameplay I enjoyed were the set pieces, like this one right here with Senua fighting a giant. It almost plays itself, but it's an intense spectacle, and I love how it seamlessly shifts from gameplay to cutscene back to gameplay all in one go. See, I don't have a problem with heavily scripted sequences like this when used sparingly. The problem comes when the level design is just as restrictive as the set pieces. And restrictive is the word, as you'll spend most of Hellblade 2 being funneled through narrow hedges and tight rock formations. Sure, the levels will occasionally open up to let you hunt for a collectible or two, but at the end of the day, it's still a textbook example of push forward to continue level design. Forgivable in 2017, tedious and played out in 2024. It's a shame because I wanted to explore the island more. I was in awe of its breathtaking vistas and haunting atmosphere, but the overly linear level design really pulled me out of the experience. Ultimately, I didn't feel like I was exploring a believable location. I felt like I was being herded through a Disney theme park.
Enough!
But what about the puzzles, I hear you ask? Well, good news. They're an improvement over the ones in Hellblade, in that they don't exclusively consist of opening doors by matching glyphs with things in the environment. Now they almost exclusively consist of staring at orbs to create pathways. Wait a minute, I think I misread that. They are little more than roadblocks, and that's being generous. A roadblock implies a challenge of some sort, an obstacle to overcome, a conundrum to solve. And I'm sorry, Hellblade 2, but I don't consider staring at an orb and then crossing a pathway to stare at another orb much of a challenge.
So far. So close to the end. They have taught you how to exist in this world. Now it's time. Senua, you changed it. Now you can see. Now we can see.
Anyway, I've saved the worst for last. The combat. Not gonna beat around the bush here, my dudes. It's stiff, awkward, and overall a significant step down from Hellblade's combat, which I wasn't too wild about to begin with. It's not that it wasn't functional, it's that it lacked any sort of depth and challenge. You could easily beat the game by spamming the light attack and parry buttons. But say what you will about the first game's combat, it was at the very least a serviceable foundation to build off for a sequel, which is why it's frustrating that Hellblade 2's approach to reworking the combat is so weirdly regressive. For starters, you never fight more than a single enemy at once now, which removes one of the only noteworthy things about Hellblade's combat. The voices in Senua's head warning you when an enemy is about to attack from behind. Wow, that's so much more interesting, thematically appropriate, and less intrusive than flashing a giant parry button over your head. Now that's gone, replaced by the voices berating you for using anything other than your heavy attack.
Body strong like rocks, you have to hit harder. Body strong like rocks, you have to hit harder. Body strong like rocks, you have to hit harder. Body strong like rocks, you have to hit harder. Body strong like rocks, you have to hit harder.
Fine then.
I guess I'll just rip out my X button and shove it up my ass.
The end result is that every fight plays the same. You circle and smack each other around for what feels like an eternity until you win, and then someone bumps into Senua and the next fight starts. Your only means of defense are a roll, which I found to be wildly inconsistent, and parrying, which, you guessed it, I also found to be wildly inconsistent. Now, I'd argue that parrying was a bit too easy in Hellblade, but in here, I couldn't for the life of me figure out what the window for parrying was, and I wasn't the only one. Are you supposed to block early? Nope. At the last second? Ooh, good guess. Wrong though. Seriously, when? The few times I successfully landed the parry felt completely random, which only added to my frustration with the combat. But we could spend all day complaining about it. The real question is, how do you fix it? Obviously, I'm not a game developer or anything like that, but I have a suggestion that I feel would improve it a little. Directional blocking. The camera already locks down whenever you enter combat, so the right joystick could easily be repurposed as a way to shift your stance, each one blocking attacks from a specific direction. Push up to block an overhead strike, push to the right or left to block slashes, etc. And to parry, you'd block in the direction the attack is coming from at the last second. Bam! Now you've taken the random factor out of parrying while still making it a challenge to pull off. This is essentially how one-on-one combat works in For Honor, and putting aside all the bullshit in that game, it's an excellent blueprint for what I'd like to see in another Hellblade game, should that happen. Ah, but there lies the question at the heart of this review. Did Hellblade need to be a series? More specifically, did Hellblade 2's story demand to be told? Well, let's talk about it.
What are you going to do? Decide.
I've read plenty of reviews for Hellblade 2, and on the whole I've been fascinated by the wildly differing opinions of its story. Some have called it an emotional masterpiece, a punishing yet beautiful continuation of the first game's story, further exploring Senua's psychosis and her struggles with self-loathing. Others have claimed it's meandering nonsense, a story that didn't need to be told, filled with contradictions and lacking a coherent central theme. The harsher reviews have written the whole thing off as a tech demo, stating that the story merely serves as a way to move the player from one set piece to the next. So what do I think? Well, all of that. It's somehow all of that. To put it simply, Hellblade 2's story is a mess. A hodgepodge of disparate ideas masquerading as a complete story. Its jaw-dropping visuals distracting you from its narrative incoherence. I've seen people complain about its length, but I replayed the first game recently and it's about as long as the second. Both games clock in at around 6.5 hours each. I don't necessarily think the length is the issue, it's how it uses it. No, stop that. While I wouldn't say the game is a thinly veiled tech demo, frankly that's a gross exaggeration, I will say that some sections veer uncomfortably close to that territory, the most egregious being the sluggish, drawn-out chapter in the middle where Senua seeks the help of the Hidden Folk, ancient beings who supposedly know how to defeat the giants.
Their eyes everywhere can feel them boring into her.
Witch.
What is she supposed to do?
Do something.
Ask them.
What do you want me to do?
It's too reminiscent of the Trials of Odin level from the first game, and while that level effectively serves as a way to explore Senua's backstory, showing us her first meeting with Dillion and how her father isolated and emotionally abused her, this level simply plods from one visually impressive spectacle to the next, doing little in the way of moving the story forward until the very end of the chapter, over an hour later. Okay, how the hell is there filler in a game that's only 6 hours long? Honestly, I wanted to spend more time with the new characters, those being the mysterious Fargrimr, the stern, and the slaver Thorgistir. They're all potentially intriguing, but never given enough time to be properly fleshed out. Perhaps this wouldn't have been as much of an issue if I was more invested in Senua's side of things. But that's the problem. Senua is the least interesting character in her own story. Melina Juergens gives her all in a performance worthy of another shiny BAFTA, but it's in service of a story that runs her character through the same gauntlet as before. Let me guess, Senua witnesses something horrific, blames herself for it, and then the Shadow, a manifestation of her self-loathing that takes on the appearance of her dead father, appears, tells her she's worthless, and she grits her teeth and marches on?
Your mother sinned and was sacrificed, and the people prospered until you came back, bringing sin with you. The gods cannot be killed. All we can do is placate them, slake their thirst with blood and fire.
I see through your darkness now. I see through your lies. And I will show them how to see as I do.
How did I guess that, Hellblade 2? Because we did this already, in the first game. The whole experience was dangerously close to just becoming misery porn, which the first game wasn't. If anything, it was the anti-misery porn game. Okay, let me explain. There's a line from Hellblade that stuck with me over the years. You cannot overcome suffering if you refuse to look at it. That's the heart of the game. It's about being consumed by self-hatred and learning how to overcome it. Her father's lies about her condition have trapped her in this poisonous worldview, where she believes herself to be this cursed being who brings misery and death wherever she goes. Her agony over Dillian's death stems not only from her inability to cope with it, but also from the belief that she was somehow responsible for it, that she's angered the gods her father worships. It's when she steps out of her father's shadow, when she casts aside his fanatical beliefs, that she's finally able to confront her inner darkness and make peace with Dillian's death. When she lets go of Dillian's head at the end, so too does she let go of the old Senua, the one consumed by fear, suffering, and self-loathing. She's able to move on, now with a better understanding of herself, her condition, and that she doesn't have to face her suffering alone. That's why I love the original Hellblade despite its flaws. Its exploration of psychosis is fascinating, yes, but it's what it has to say about self-loathing that really moved me, speaking as someone who's dealt with his fair share of that. It's at times a punishingly bleak experience, but it ends on a hopeful note, one that isn't cloying. My point in bringing all of this up is to say that I wanted Hellblade 2 to focus more on how Senua moves on, rather than regurgitate the same character beats as before. That's why, on the whole, I enjoyed the last quarter of the game the most, because it feels like a proper follow-up to the first game. It's centered around healing, and the powerful influence Senua has on those around her, particularly Thorgestr, who I'd argue is the game's most compelling character. What makes him so interesting is that he's effectively Senua from the first game, as he too lives in the shadow of his father, who insists that sacrificing slaves is the only way to appease the giants. Early on, he appears to be hopelessly consumed by this belief, but Senua's bravery in facing the fire giant Iltoiga makes Thorgestr open up, and we see a side of him that he's hidden from his father out of fear, one that rejects his tyranny and barbaric methods.
There is more than the sword here, more than he can understand.
No more slaves, and no more sacrifices.
He is trying to understand. Is he?
Sacrifices. No more cowering in our fortress. We could fight.
We have, but not in the way he thinks.
More sacrifices, swear.
I never wanted any of that. I just did not believe it was possible to defeat them, and now I see.
A ray of hope.
My perception of him changed dramatically after this scene. I no longer saw a loathsome man who was hell-bent on maintaining his father's oppressive grip on the island, but rather a tormented man who wanted to escape his pernicious influence. It's a good subversion, and I liked how he and Senua grew closer together as the game went along. I wanted more scenes with them, but hey, maybe they'll explore their companionship further in a sequel. Oh wait, that's right, he dies. What a fucking waste of a good character. And on that exasperating note, let's talk about the ending, which punches so many holes in the plot that you could repurpose it as a cheese grater. Now, Hellblade's story was open to all manner of interpretation, but by the end, it was abundantly clear that the mythical elements weren't real, which I was fine with because that's one of the themes of the game. The hardest battles are fought in the mind, not the sword. A point effectively demonstrated by the final battle, which is infinite and only ends when the player puts down the controller. So needless to say, I was puzzled when I noticed Hellblade 2 was treating all the mythical elements as if they were real. I mean, they're fantastic set pieces, but doesn't this go against the point of the first game? I thought. But whatever, I just shrugged my shoulders and enjoyed the spectacles. Until I reached the end of the game.
And as the land healed and the people healed, their fear ebbed. And he saw them start to turn away. To think for themselves, to choose their own path. And he felt his own strength ebb in turn. And he wanted to hold on to that strength, to hold his place in their hearts. their wills. So he made the giants, brought them forth from the shaking earth, the roaring sea, the blinding snow, brought them into being. And the people who trusted him and obeyed him, they saw them too, and saw they had more to fear.
No! I will shine a light on your lies, and they will see the truth. There are no giants, it's just you, a leaf.
Yeah, so it turns out they weren't real after all. Thorgestyr's father manufactured the giants as a way to keep the island's inhabitants under his control. Now I want you to keep that in mind as I play these unrelated clips.
He is helping us.
No! You saved him, remember?
Yes, he's saving you now.
Stop thinking. Stop thinking.
Hide!
Run!
She will not spare you again. Go!
She's coming back!
This woman here, Senua, she knows how to defeat the giants. All of us, we've seen it.
She has to trust us.
There's a giant.
Here, another giant.
Another giant.
He roams the beaches and sinks our boats, cutting us off from the sea.
More death.
And we're close to running out of food.
More darkness.
Attack! Attack now! Again! Attack!
Bull fucking shit. How was everyone able to see them if they weren't real? Have you considered that maybe Senua isn't the only one suffering from Oh no, don't start that. I'm sure that's somebody's interpretation, but I refuse to believe it's the official explanation. But sure, let's entertain that idea. Maybe everyone on the island is suffering from psychosis. Hell, maybe Senua's companions aren't even real, just figments of her imagination. And if you haven't considered it, maybe we aren't even real. Maybe we just exist inside an editing program. See, it never ends. It doesn't make the story more interesting, it makes it boring. Maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe there is a reasonable explanation for all of this. But as it stands, the mythical elements in Hellblade 2 are poorly thought out, contradictory, and only exist to pad a game that doesn't have much to say, ultimately proving the naysayers right. But see, I don't think that's true. If anything, parts of Hellblade 2 prove that another story could have been told. One about moving on and helping others fight their inner darkness, which again is why I like Thorgestyr's plotline so much. So to answer the question of whether Hellblade 2's story demanded to be told, well, a quarter of it did. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble here, so let's move on to the conclusion. Should you play Senua's Saga Hellblade 2? Man, I don't think I've agonized over a verdict more than I have with this one. To summarize everything up to this point, in case you fell asleep halfway through or had to go stop your cat from pissing on the Roomba, I was wowed by the presentation, disappointed by the gameplay, and thoroughly mixed on the story. You could easily recommend or not recommend the game based on any of these elements alone, but I like to judge the overall package, and only in rare circumstances do I let the quality of one aspect trump everything else. So what about Hellblade 2? I want Ninja Theory to keep making games. I'd like to make that clear before giving my verdict. I watch these behind-the-scenes videos and listen to the actors talk enthusiastically about their characters, and see something that's in rare supply in the AAA market: passion. It's the reason Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice had such a profound impact on players, myself included. It was a beautiful story told in a unique way by a studio that had something to say. I'm sure plenty of players will be moved by this game in the same way they were by the original, but this is my review, and that means
I choose how to end this.
Hellblade 2 is neither the masterpiece critics have made it out to be, nor is it the irredeemable dumpster fire some claim it is. When you look past its gorgeous presentation and excellent performances, what you'll find is a frustrating mess of a game. A dated walking sim occasionally broken up by boring puzzles and terrible combat sections, all held together by a story that has its moments, but ultimately falls apart under any amount of scrutiny. I disagree with the opinion that you can't make a sequel to Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, because what makes this game all the more frustrating to me is that it does have a story to tell, one about healing and helping others overcome their trauma. Sadly, it spends too much time wallowing in the same themes as before, leaving its more interesting topics for the last quarter of the game. Too little, too late, I say. I take absolutely no joy in saying this, but I don't recommend Senua's Saga Hellblade 2. Turns out, it's not much fun writing a negative review for a game you were excited for. But that's showbiz, my dudes, and I try to be as honest as possible with these reviews, and make an effort to leave my biases at the door and just play the game, and then talk about how it made me feel afterward. What do you want?
I just think it's funny that you were bitching about clickbait earlier, and then proceeded to make the thumbnail for this video a giant eyesore. Care to explain yourself, Mr. Soapbox?
I mean, I never said I wasn't a hypocrite.